that at some point in time, I'm going to need carpet, I'm going to need refrigerators, appliances, major appliances. I may need to get a furnace. I may need to get roofing. And so I set up a home decorating center as an entity underneath my corporation. And again, to stress why it's underneath the corporation, if I had a problem with any of these DBAs, and if they got sued, who applied for them? Who actually owns those? Not me personally. So they could never come after me. They would go after the generic corporation. So again, anything that you think that you may want to buy or get discounts on, you would set up those as companies underneath the generic corporation. Now, someone may ask, well, Charles, why would you do DBAs? Why not just have them as independent entities to begin with? Well, some of you guys are fortunate to live in various states where setting up your entities and maintaining the entities are not very expensive. In the state of California, we have state income tax. We call it franchise tax. That there's a minimum of $800 a year for any entity. So if it's an LLC, C Corp, S Corp, U Corp, Mom's Corp, whatever it is, if it's an entity in the state of California, you pay a minimum of $800. So if I had 4 or 5 companies underneath my umbrella company, which would be my generic corporation, I, of course, would like to get EIN numbers on each one, so each one would really be a separate company. But would it be a DBA, where I'm not paying anything on an annual basis to maintain it as far as any kind of minimum tax or setup fees or fees going to, annual, this, that, and the other in terms of maintaining a corporation? There's only one corporation, and the rest of those would be companies with their own separate EIN numbers, their own separate bank accounts. When I want to start applying for corporate credit, I can actually apply for credit for each of those 4, 5, 6, or 7 companies that are all underneath my LLC. I can apply for corporate credit with all of them because they're all companies. Now, let's say that with my ad agency in particular, I see the handwriting on the wall. This ad agency is racking up quite a bit in terms of ads for my various entities. And I say, man, I better disconnect that ad company, because if that ad company ever has to declare bankruptcy, if it was just a DBA, the bankruptcy of that company involves the owner. So it's going to wipe out everything. It's going to affect the XYZ Corporation, and it would also affect all the assets that the XYZ Corporation has, which means that all those other entities that are underneath it, those are all assets. So everything is affected. So what I would do is file what's called a disconnect, disconnecting the ad agency from the XYZ Corporation, and then I would incorporate the ad agency. So now when I need to bankrupt the ad agency, it stands alone. It doesn't affect anything else. Now, if you're fortunate enough to live in one of those states where it doesn't cost much to maintain the entities, then from Jump Street, yes, you might form a number of different corporations or different entities, because if it doesn't cost you much to maintain them. Now, what I mean by costing much, for an example, I established a number of companies. Matter of fact, I established 9 LLCs in Michigan several years ago because I wanted them to have age. I wanted my entities to, first of all, one of the key numbers is, man, if your entity is 2 years or older, then the floodgates almost open when it comes to you being able to apply for business and corporate credit. Right now, you could go to Office Max, Staples, what's the other one? Office Depot, places like that, and apply for corporate credit. You look at the application, and it will say, if your entity is 2 years or older, they do not want any personal information. And so it becomes much easier if your entity is 2 years or older to get into the corporate program in terms of getting business in corporate credit. Okay, let me see if there's something else that I wanted to say about. Oh, now,
Carol, can I ask a question on the corporate? Would you just touch bases on that?
yes, please, quick.
Real quick, does your you said 2 years or older, does it have to be making a certain amount of money, minimum money, to apply for that?
Okay, do me a favor, mute now. I will answer that in part, but we will discuss that a little bit later on in the call.
Okay.
What happens is that startup companies can very easily get credit at those kind of places that I just named because, see, the credit limit is only going to be about $200 or $300. So that's not much. They're not really looking for you to have much. But they still will contact Dun & Bradstreet to find out, if you're who you say you are. Now, there's a whole program, and for a number of you guys, I have already sent to you in a PDF exactly how to do and how to set up your company for corporate credit and all that kind of thing. So that's all that I really want to say about that right now. I would touch more on that a little bit later, but the person who asked me that question, if you don't already have that PDF, let me know, and of course I'll email it out to you. It's about 63 pages. It goes into detail as to the kind of name that you should best have for your entity, because in terms of business and corporate credit, the lenders really do not want to see such and such real estate, such and such investment, problem solvers, resolution, we work with, we buy houses. It's almost, impossible for you to get business in corporate credit like that. You would be better served if you had another name. So if your entity already has that kind of name in it, don't rush out and change the name. Just think in terms of forming another entity, and we do it from scratch. Now, let me just I'll say one other thing I wasn't intending to at this point, but I will. One of the things that is extremely helpful is that if you have ever had a DBA in the past, that you can show that you had filed it as a DBA, you had a license under that DBA, whatever the case may be. At some point in time, when you're dealing with Dun & Bradstreet and they ask you, how long have you been in business? They're not asking you how long have you been incorporated, how long have you been in business? And if you can go back to some old file and say, oh, I've been in business 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, and here's, records to prove that. Here's my DBA that I filed 6 years ago. So I've, had that business for 6 years. This is the kind of work that I've been doing. I just incorporated last week, but I've been in business for years. So if you can find an old DBA or an old entity, now you just resurrect it by incorporating it, and now you're good to go. Some of those things will be talked about in the document in what I'm calling the PDF that I have available to send out. I don't think that particular concept is, but you anyway have that for now. Now, getting back to the Ray Reynolds. Ray Reynolds then said you have your XYZ generic corporation, you put your DBAs under those. Now, I also said that, yes, it would be nice if you could incorporate those from Jump Street. There's something called Series LLC. There are only, let me see, last month I think that there were only 18 states, maybe only 16, that have already approved Series LLC. For us, it would be Texas is already approved, Nevada's approved, Oklahoma, Utah, Puerto Rico, and several others. I can't recall them offhand, but all you'd have to do is Google Series LLCs, and you can also add to that to filter your search which states are approved for Series LLCs. Now, what a Series LLC is all about is getting back to the Ray Reynolds scenario, that umbrella company would be called the master LLC. And now those entities that you're putting underneath it, those would be series LLC. Now, some states, instead of calling them series, the overall terminology is series, but they will also call them containers. So you can put as many containers or as many series as you want under your master. That means that on an annual basis, you're only filing one document for your master, and you list all of your, I would call them subsidiaries, but they really are just series. You just list all the series. So you may have 4, 5, or 6 different series, but that's not costing you anything to maintain. You're only maintaining the master, and you've listed the series. Now, you still, again, have to be careful with the commingling. If you want each of the series to be a standalone, be totally independent, so that if you had to bankrupt one, that's not going to affect any of the others because you never commingled assets. And again, I can't stress the importance of that. You cannot commingle assets if you want these entities to be standalone. So that makes it a slam dunk. And like I said, Texas has already approved. All of this started in Delaware, I think, in 96 or 98. So Delaware has had the series in place for a long time. You take companies like Delta Airlines. Each of Delta's flights, like Delta Flight 105, Delta Flight 215, Delta Flight 366, each of Delta's flights is its own entity. That way they have compartmentalized so that when one of Delta's flights were to go down, let's say if it had 200 passengers, the heirs of the deceased passengers will, of course, sue Delta, especially if it was pilot error or something like that. They will sue Delta. But they can't get anything really from Delta. All they're suing is the flight, the Delta Flight 105. It went down, so you sued Delta Flight 105. Now, of course, Delta has plenty of insurance, but by them having compartmentalized, Delta Company is protected. That's the way we want to do our various businesses. This is why a lot of the gurus will tell you that each time you buy an additional building of some sort, house, apartment building, whatever it is, if you want that building to be a standalone, and if somebody did a half gainer on that property and sued you, matter of fact, I know of a doctor who bought, I think this was about 4 or 5 years ago, he bought an apartment building. And I think he probably paid, I'm thinking $125,000, $200,000 down or something. He got the apartment building. He didn't have that building over 6 months before he got sued. The person who sued him said that their child contracted lead-based poisoning, and the doctor's insurance company did not cover that. He didn't have the proper disclosures and all of that dealing with the lead base, but he had only owned the building for less than 6 months. They sued him for, I can't recall how many millions of dollars. His insurance company didn't cover it, so guess what? He was in trouble. Now, obviously, if he had had that building in an entity, then they could have only sued to the extent of the assets within the entity, and so in this case, it just would have been his down payment. You know, his $100,000 or whatever his down payment was. They would not have been able to go after him personally for the millions of dollars. Now, while we're on that, I also sent out to a number of people on the call. Let me see, what was that in? Yeah, that was in what I call the PDF dealing with the corporate credit. It gave you an example, excuse me, of 2 bartenders. These 2 bartenders, these 2 young men, wanted to buy a property, so they bought a duplex. And they wanted to go in and fix it up themselves, went in, did the work. They bought it in the name of an LLC, but they never bothered to get an EIN number for the LLC. They never bothered to, of course, you need an EIN number to open a bank account, so they never got a bank account in the name of the LLC. And they didn't even do the appropriate annual meeting. So you may think, oh, as an LLC, I don't need to do an annual meeting. So they didn't do an annual meeting, and so basically they didn't do anything. This was like an alter ego. And so to make a long story short, and it's in the PDF, so you can read it in more detail, but I'm just giving you the overview. To make a long story short, their tenant sued because the part of the roof fell on her and she sustained injuries. So she sued these guys. Their insurance didn't cover it because the insurance said, well, you just didn't do the roofing stuff right, you did it yourself, and so we're not going to cover the claim. So they sued, pierced the corporate veil, because these guys were really operating as their alter ego. They didn't do resolutions, they didn't have the appropriate meetings, they just didn't do things right. Even as an LLC, you will think, oh, well, it's not required for me to do this, this, and this, whereas with a C Corp, they have a lot more regulation. If you really look and see what the regulations are, they are not that bad. Yes, you have to have resolutions for a lot of the things that you do, but whether you have to have it or not, like an example that I gave you earlier, it would be worth your while to establish a paper trail indicating that it's not you making these decisions, the corporation or the LLC is asking you to do these things, so therefore you're abiding by what the entity wants you to do. You're not just doing things on your own. So you have separated yourself from the company. In the paperwork that I have sent a number of you guys, and if you have not received it, let me know and I will send this to you. I indicate that what you should do is pick up, just like I'm looking at one book right now. The name of this book is The Corporate Records Handbook, and it's done by attorney Anthony Mancuso. An excellent book. It has a CD with it that has all the forms. So if you want to know, geez, I'm not a very creative person in terms of writing and legalese. If I want to make a loan to my company, how do I do the resolution? Boom, loan to the company. Here's the form. How much is the loan? What are the terms? Boom, boom, boom. You put that in there, and it gives you recommendations as to how you should handle the interest and so forth. So the book itself will give you an explanation of what to do. The form is there. You fill in the blanks, type it up, print it up, and put it in your corporate book, and now you're squared away in terms of how you did the loan to the company. Or vice versa, if the company is giving you a loan. If you want to set up any kind of program for reimbursement, if you're buying something, selling something. I think it has about 115 forms in there or more, and all you have to do is sign the form, look at the little explanation, fill out the form, type it up. It's already in PDF, so you're just filling in the blanks. You're not really typing up the form. You're filling in the blanks. You print it, you put it in your corporate record books, and you're good to go. You should do that. Keep good records for any entity that you have. Now, another thing about entities, in the paperwork that I sent most of you guys, I suggest for your banking account that you use either U.S. Bank or Comerica, because they charge 0 fees, monthly fees, for your business account. They will even supply you with checks. Comerica even supplies you with a stamp so that you can stamp your checks to make your deposits. And they just give you everything for the corporation that you need, and it's all free. I mean, I was surprised with one of my entities. They sent me, I think, about 6 checkbooks and registers and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it was great, and it cost me nothing, with the debit card, of course. Now, getting back to Ray Reynolds, and I'm going to finish him up. before I get too distracted. We've already talked about that Ray Reynolds wants you to have the generic corporation. Put whatever company you want underneath it with its designation as to what it is doing. And then next he says that he wants you to set up what he calls an asset corporation. The reason for the asset corporation is that if you remember back, with your LLC, a person can sue and get up to all the assets that are within that LLC. He wants you to be able to siphon out the assets or siphon out the equity in the assets so that the asset company is going to have all of the equity. So let's say, for an example, that your company that's exposed to the public, that would be likely to get sued. Matter of fact, if anything got sued, it's the company that's exposed to the public. So your asset company is like Bank of America. Bank of America then will buy the truck, or let's say finance the truck, or Bank of America does its thing and leases the company that's exposed. The company that's exposed leases everything from the asset company. And I'm not going to get into details on this call, but later on, I can share with you guys the paperwork of how you can go about doing that. Because Ray Reynolds had a course, and if Melvin Grimes is on the line, Melvin went out with me to Ray, I think was back in 1995, and we pooled our resources. I think it cost us about $2,600 at the time. 4 of us went, split the cost, and man, we came back with all kind of tapes and books and all kind of stuff showing us how to do this type of thing. And I'm willing to share, some of that material with you guys. And it's not my intention to try to make any money. I'm trying to help you guys out and build a team. So let me finish up, Ray, and then I'll tell you really what the rest of my purpose is and what I would really like to do in terms of growth. So you have the asset company that's really going to hold all the equity in everything. The company that's exposed to the public, if it needs a computer, it's going to lease the computer from the asset company. If it needs a car, truck, business equipment, chalkboard, whatever it needs is going to lease everything from the asset company. So now if somebody sued your company that's exposed, what are they going to get? The company really doesn't own anything. Everything is leased. So that is tremendous protection. Ray recommends a third entity, third corporation, which he calls a shelf. And the documents that I sent out to you guys, it said S-E-L-F, it missed the H, but it's called a shelf, like you put something on the shelf to hold it. It's a shelf company, and the reason for that shelf company is that if your exposed company ever has to go BK, then the shelf company can step right in and take over. That's why you see so many restaurants and other entities, it will say under new management. And all they did was perhaps BK the first. It didn't really have any assets because the asset company had all the assets, but the shelf company just comes in and takes over the leases, and voila, you haven't lost a beat. So that's how he operates things. So now, hopefully, you can get a better handle now and a clearer understanding on when and how to use your LLC, because if you want to set it up as a pass-through, do you really want to pass through the income to you personally? You have to look at your own tax situation and make that determination. Or do you want to be able to pass it on to another entity that's going to be taxed at the corporate level, realizing that the corporate tax is only 15% of the first $50,000. Now, let's go into my goals and objectives, and then I can give you guys some other illustrations. What I would really love to see us do is build the kind of team together where we can share and cooperate with the tools that we have, just like I mentioned, the stuff that I have from Ray Reynolds, there's no point. Now, you may question, well, is it plagiarizing and all this kind of stuff, and question the ethics of it. But the point is, if I have information within that whole $2,600 worth of kit that I got, I'm not going to send you guys the whole kit because you don't need it. But if you need some information of how to do this or that from the kit, I feel like that I can get that information to you guys. Some of you guys will have outstanding programs that you can share. So I would like to see us share some of those things. One of my associates in Cyprus, and she emailed me about 12 o'clock last night and said, oh, Charles, I can't make the meeting, but I'm working with her. We're doing some things in terms of special needs housing. So we're working on that together. And we're going to take that concept all over the country. I have another associate who I didn't even invite to be on the line because, I mean, they are so advanced with this stuff, they don't need to be on this call. But they also specialize in special needs housing. Now, to quickly share with you guys what special needs housing is all about and how I would like to cooperate with team members. Now, this is not for everybody, and I don't want everybody to do this. We will have to select a group that we would really like to have do this. Here's what special needs housing is all about. And for reference, you can Google a guy, he refers to himself as Dr. Cash Flow. His real name is Nick Sordoti. I ran into him a number of years. He did a session for the Apartment Owners Association out in Long Beach, California. And he goes all around the country. And here's what he basically says do. If you have a property like I have a property in Long Beach, a 4-bedroom house. He says, Charles, rather than for you to rent that house out on a regular basis to a tenant who would pay you like $2,200, consider special needs program. Here's what special needs is all about. There are agencies like the VA administration, people who work with the blind, people who work with people in wheelchairs. There are a number of agencies who work with people who have special needs. I'm not talking about drug abuse, early prison release. I'm talking about socially acceptable special needs. Now, let's say it's the VA. The VA is working with somebody to try to get them into housing. They would be willing to get this person into an apartment, a 1-bedroom apartment, and take care of the utilities. In Los Angeles, a 1-bedroom apartment would run about $1,000. The utilities would run, and with cable, about $300. So that's $1,300. Now, with special needs, and there's a whole program set up for this. I mean, I got the website and exactly what to say to the caseworkers and all this kind of thing. So what we would do is go into the caseworker and say, look, Mrs. Caseworker, rather than for you to have your client in an apartment by himself, we have this program set up where he's going to share a house with 3 other people who have, let's say, similar or kind of complementary handicaps. In other words, they're going to live as a family unit. They will each have their own separate 1-bedroom. I'm providing total turnkey. All the utilities, all the furnishings, even when it comes down to the ironing board and the coffee maker. I'm supplying everything. Okay, total turnkey. So that when your veteran moves in, he will have the cable. He'll have the big screen TV. He's going to have access to a computer and all that kind of stuff. Now, would you rather see him living in that home environment or living by himself? The caseworker said, oh, well, that sounds great. Yeah, let's do that. I can supply you with 4 of my people. Let's put them under one roof. We'll still continue to pay you what we would have paid, doing it the other way, $1,300 a month times 4. What is that? $5,200? Now, which would have been better? For me to have gotten $2,200 rent or $5,200, and all I had to do to get the $5,200, yes, I had to get the contract and all of that, but I'm just providing the accommodation. I'm not providing meals. I'm not providing any medical. I'm not providing any kind of counseling. that person is still working with their caseworker. So if they had a problem with food, they work with the caseworker.